host Leon Abrams, and with me is my usual guest, Brother Takuma Unsere. Welcome, Brother Takuma, to the program.
As usual, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, so today we'll be talking, as we normally do, about the political, social, economic situation here in this country called Guyana, a country that is supposed to be one where every citizen has a right to live, to exist in a way that is unrestricted by political agents who are racist and are bent on exercising authority in ways that suggest and manifest apartheid dictatorship. And as my brother would even say, beyond dictatorship, going into the Mussolini type fascist regimes. So we have a number of things to talk about. We're in the month of August, and we know that it's the month of emancipation. But are we truly, we have spoken about the colonial administration and emancipation, and we are still under the shackles of the colonial administration in what we call neocolonialism. But now we are faced with another challenge here in Guyana with emancipation. Where are we with that in Guyana, Brother Ugo?
Well, African emancipation in Guyana will not be completed until African people get justice for the more than 250 years of enslavement and colonialism. And, we work here for over 200 years with not a cent, and Guyana is indebted to us. The Guyanese state is indebted to us, and getting that kind of justice that is tied up with generational wealth, is important to the emancipation of African people. So our emancipation has different dimensions. And then we have the political aspect of our emancipation. We will not be fully emancipated until Africans share the political power with other ethnic groups equally. We will not be emancipated if Africans doesn't share the economic pie of the country equally with other ethnic groups. So any area where we find ourselves faced with domination is a clear sign that our emancipation is not complete. And we have to, this generation has to make sure that we push forward, because our ancestors, who many will argue was not as equipped as us, but they had some clear red lines and some clear sense of themselves, and they ensure that we don't have chains on our feet and our hands. And we have to, as an African community, we have to ensure that we pass on to the next generation of Africans in Guyana a country that is more just, a country that respects African interests, and a country that is devoted to non-domination as the sacred principle of nation building. And that is our charge. And that is an important aspect of our emancipation. It is not simply to celebrate our victories or our advancement that we achieved in the past. Is to reflect upon our present condition, understand our present challenges, and to seek to emancipate ourselves from those negative challenges. And one of the obvious challenges we have is both in the level of the economy and the level of politics. We have to find a way of ending the winner-take-all system that excludes Africans from political power. We have to find an economic model of the country that doesn't assign Africans to less than 10% of the economy. Half of our country can't exist on less than 10% of the economy. So our emancipation has to be readdressed, and while we pay attention to our achievements in the past, more importantly is where we want to go in the future and our present condition.
But you mentioned push forward. Is it in the same context as pushing back? Because we have so many things confronting us, as you've mentioned. We are sitting here, and this program is a target of the Media Monitoring Unit, which is now being used as an arm of the state. You're speaking here and you're making statements, and it seems as though they're every statement you make, you have to qualify it by saying, I am expressing an opinion, because all of the entries that they've been coming up with, saying that you are to answer to these things because you have created a red line error, which can cause the station to be shut down and all of these things, that you are stating opinion as fact. Now, I've been teaching English language since I was a scout, and in particularly in report writing, we teach fact and opinion, and you don't have to say that this is my opinion to qualify what you're saying. When Jack Dio says Norton this and Norton that, and he doesn't say my opinion is that Norton is and Norton that. He speaks what his opinion is. And we cannot say, as they are targeting the Walter Rodney Groundings and the Politics 101, by saying that what we are saying is opinion as fact. And so they're asking the station to justify why they should not be dealt with in ways. It's suppression, it's censorship, using an agency that is supposed to be impartial in a partisan way, and all of the other things that are taking place that are demonstrating the apartheid nature of the state. So how do we, when you say push forward, when we're confronted with these things, is push forward being said in the context of pushback?
Well, I think the two are, not necessarily different.
Okay.
The two are not necessarily different. But I want to join with you in solidarity with Channel 9, because Channel 9 has been a very important national institution, both in the nation and more particularly at the service of the African community. And this station, more than any other station, whatever have been the political achievements of Africans collectively as a community, this station, played a major role, has played, continue to play, and is likely to play a major role in the future. And I want to appeal to our community that we have to begin to prepare to defend our fundamental interests in the things and our institutions.
Yes,
and if the government target our institutions for certain kinds of behavior, we must let them know, that we are prepared to defend our institutions. You see, they're getting away a lot of things because they're not getting the kind of pushback that they ought to be getting, and we as an African community have to be very self-critical, and we have been saying on this program that we complain a lot. We know all the problems, we know everything all the PP is doing to us, but we seem not to be able to collectively resolve how to handle our challenges. And I think there is where African energies and the best of our minds have to be directed. A lot of our best minds have been directed in explaining our reality. I don't think nobody could say there's a deficiency in the articulation of the problems, by the opposition and by the African community and our thinkers and our opinion makers. I think they have 100% marks there. Where there is a deficiency is that the same kind of mental energy is not being directed in how to strengthen African resistance and national resistance. We have to, a country got to do that every now and then. You have to look at your people, look at your situation, and to see where you have some deficit, and you have to find ways and means how to get these trade unions more militant, how to get African groups more militant, how to, you have to address that as a problem. And I don't think sufficient energy is being put to that, and the PP gets away because, the responses they get is not sufficient.
Yeah, but and look at we're talking about emancipation. I mean, what we're going to do for a fact is that all these because I have them in my email, because the channel normally would send them to us. We're going to begin to put them on Facebook and on TikTok and so on. Let people see what this monitoring agency is doing, how they are targeting the programs of Politics 101 and Walter Rodney.
And they also target all the other
programs that are progressive
that
are representing the interests of the African.
It's a war they declare on us.
Yeah, right. And so we're going to begin to publicize these things and send them to the embassies and the other international community, so that this new affront is made large in the public domain. We cannot allow them to. They're sitting there in the library at NCN, a government agency. They're operating out of a government agency.
Yeah.
All right? Following the dictates of the government, and are trying to muzzle what we were saying, and dictate to this station how they should proceed in terms of their programming. Even the news. They're attacking the news.
And when we accuse them of apartheid behavior, they complain.
Right. Look at what has happened during the emancipation. We have our celebrations, and the Prime Minister, just the same day when we were preparing to have our cultural fest and so on, is to have our organization called to say that he was coming to our program, the 1st of August movement, and that he would be the main speaker on the program.
I tell you.
You understand? Now, if we were a weak community and the leadership was weak, then they would have bullied their way. But in the presence of Dr. David Hines and the Buxton community, they knew that could not have happened. So when David told them that, we have been in existence for over 50 years, and we have never had any political agency dictate to us who should be the main speaker on our program and so on, eventually they backed down. But in other communities, they confronted the people. In the Namsel, Brother Jacobs, the minister turned up to speak at the people's program uninvited, and all he did, Ogun, you can relate the incident.
In fact, we're not even certain whether the minister turned up, because according to what Jacobs told me, they saw a vehicle enter the compound, enter the thing, and they knew it was a government vehicle, and they anticipate it's probably some government official who's coming here may want to speak. So Jacobs, went to the person who had the mic at the time and said, look, announce that no government person have been invited to speak on this program, and this is our program, and no government person will be allowed to speak. Now, they didn't even know whether it's a donkey in the vehicle or the vehicle. But a African PPP enforcer walk up to Jacobs, snatch him, lift you up and knock you down on the ground. And Jacobs end up being charged by the police for preventing the minister from speaking at a public event. And there's no evidence that the minister physically was present. This is where the police force have gone. And this is the impasse that they have for African people. And this is why I always argue from this program or other programs, our problem is an African problem. Because it's not Jack Dio come and lift up the brother and knock you down. It's a as a black brother, and I don't understand black people. I mean, if you go to a Malibunta and you interfere with the Malibunta, all the Malibunta jump on you and sting you all over your face and your body. If you go to a nest of African bees and you disturb the nest, they jump on you. And we are demonstrating as a community some responses and some behaviors which we really have to seriously address in our communities. You want to see the comrades at Demnan still has less consciousness and reflexes than the African bees or Malibunta? That they don't know what to do when people violate your space? Yeah, but anyway, I am interested to see how they're going to prove this case, and this ridiculous charge of preventing a non-existent minister, because the minister didn't come out, the alleged minister didn't come out to the vehicle, okay, to present himself. So you know who or what was in the vehicle, but that is irrelevant. The important thing is that the PPP enforcer on the ground was bold enough to assault the comrade. And then the police turned around instead of charging the assaulter, charge the person who was assaulted with this ridiculous crime of preventing the minister from speaking. I mean, this is where we are.
Public event.
Yeah.
The event was not an event open to the minister to come and dictate.
Yeah, the minister was invited to come. But I mean, I don't understand how a police force. Okay, police force can be under pressure, but you have to be. The police that brought that charge and the commander of that thing to carry a charge like that to the court. I mean, it speaks a lot about your own disrespect for yourself. You know what I mean? And the magistrate should really deal with them seriously. That's abuse of law and the power.
But it's not only there that did it. I mean, they went all the way to West Coast, Barbados, and all along where the Africans were having their festivities, they dictated that they must turn up and present themselves.
Burnham never did that to Indian cultural activity. So this is a new level of racial bullyism. And when you call it out for what it is, they're complaining.
Yeah, but I mean, you're saying pushback. We gotta begin to chant like this. When I did slow fire, more fire, whatever fire means, all right, they gotta interpret it in whatever way they want. But I'm saying slow fire, more fire, all right. If they want to interpret it literally, that is their business. I am using figurative expression. It's for them to interpret, and the EAB, the election monitoring unit, could interpret it how they want, right? But we have to begin to resist and we can't sit down, continue to sit down, because while we do that, the PPP is becoming more and more emboldened to press us back and to push us back and to treat us as though we are non-entities, because that is their perception of us, right? Look what they've done to the folks at Melanie, all right? The co-op got a judgment from the court, the High Court, that they are the legal owners of a piece of land. They've begun to develop the place, and they went to put a notice there saying that, well, look, this land is government land and it's for future development. They did the same thing to North and more when Nandalal, it is claimed, admitted that the land was co-op land. When he met with the people, it is alleged that he admitted that this land belonged to the co-op. And subsequently, the government went there again and put a notice saying that the land is for future government development. They have gone into the co-ops along the Suzyklin and Highway and all of the other co-ops across the country. They are trying to bully people into, submission and trying to seize lands that are in the hands of black people. And we are sitting down and we are taking it. All right? The country cannot rest easy. It should not be resting easy in the face of these affronts that are taking place.
But you see, you got to be realistic. You got to look at the political leadership you got. And you have to look at the people's political culture. And we have had very recently an example of how these things play itself out. It is one thing for us to argue correctly what the approach ought to be. But it is another thing to get the collective African community or a significant part of the African populace to act in the appropriate way. And that is the challenge you have in this equation. Because on the one hand, you want a united front against them, which is the basic and elementary approach to political struggle. But the political opposition in Guyana, it's a electoral opposition, and it seems to define their electoral behavior in a narrow framework. There are many electoral parties who inculcate, as a matter of principle, extra parliamentary struggle as part of the tools. They accept that, well, look, it's through elections we're going to bring about change of government and so forth. But there are some clear red lines as an opposition. If the government cross, we're going to bring the people out in the streets. We're going to fight with all we might to push back. So the opposition got some very clear lines. In Guyana, there's no clear line in the collective political party opposition on any issue. And that is part of the problem of struggle. Because you can't tie the opposition to anything that you're certain they are prepared to invest a certain degree amount of political capital to achieve it. So you're trying to help them, but there's no red lines. You have no sense. Boundaries. Okay, they say they want a new voters list. But they're not clear that, well, look, if we don't get a new voters list, then we participate in the local government elections. We're not accepting that. We want biometrics. If we get biometrics, well, this is where we invest in it, you know. So there's no clear red lines for the opposition. And it's hard in a country, any country in the world, where the political opposition don't have red lines to put limitations on the government and to mobilize the people in defense of. And that's part of the real problem you have here. And you also have the problem here that the opposition haven't yet called the masses or their supporters out for any significant struggle upon anything. Where the opposition seems to be just grinding itself slowly to the next 2025 elections. So their supporters have no sense of battle readiness. And when you outside of them trying to inculcate battle readiness, they're not even smart enough, okay, to use the energies that you're trying to inflict into the equation to their advantage. They're more concerned in suppressing those energies. You know, so you're really in a tough and difficult situation, but as everything else, we have to find a way to fight back, both as an African community and as a political opposition. And the African community has to prepare to do things that the political opposition may not be willing to do. You know, political parties got their own interests, and sometimes the interests coexist with the ethnic interests of constituencies, and sometimes the party has interests are just partisan party interests. But in this equation, the African community has to develop its own red lines, you know, and to fight for it and to force the government as well as your party, okay, to respect those red lines. And we haven't sufficiently, you know, inculcate in our own people, the African community, those red lines, and that is part of the struggle, and time is running against us.
Well, it takes a spark, I mean, someday some madman can get up and it's going to be ignited. But we got to, I mean, while we don't want it to be like that, I mean, spontaneity in struggle is a phenomenon
It's part of the reality.
Part of the reality. Like you were saying, there should be some strategic approach by the opposition in getting to that point where people are willing to fight back and to say to this dictatorship, this apartheid regime, that this is where the line is drawn in the sand, that you need not cross here, all right? Because they are basically adventurers. What they're doing is seeing how far they can go, all right? And they're pushing and pushing and pushing. And while they're pushing forward, we are pulling back, having our backs against the wall without any pushback, as you were saying. And unless we begin to do that, then we are going to find ourselves not against the wall, but under the ground.
I would say
right?
we're not without any significant pushback, because there is some pushback. I don't want the other comrades who got their programs and who really working hard to feel that we're not recognizing the efforts. But
talking too much. I believe we're talking too much.
You gotta get significant pushback.
We gotta go beyond talk.
We
have to go beyond talk, because unless we do that, these people ain't gonna respond to us in any way. All of check Jack Dew's record. It was only after, I mean, people demonstrated that we are serious about, where we are going and what we want, that he was willing to come to the table to speak. All right? Otherwise, he's going to be flying his mouth all the time and dictating to us how we must be treated and what we must say, what we must do, like they're trying to do with this station right now.
Treating us like little children.
Right, like his children. All right? So unless this country is, for me, that Jack Dew and the likes of Nandalal and those are out of the equation, we are not going to see a difference, because the others, I don't know. I hear people talking about Irfan and his Muslim conscience should be. I don't know what kind of I mean, these people don't consider these things, all right. But with Jack Dew in the equation and Nandalal and those, we are going to continue to be down a road that is perilous, right? And so we have to carefully consider how we're going to deal with that kind of.
You see, that put me to raise the question of Nandala's response to Nigeria, when Nigeria argue that we need to have a supermajority in Parliament, which will force cooperation, force the government to have to win, the support of the other side, so that major things could be done. And Nandalal responds in a very violent way, and he dissed power sharing, and he described it as power grabbing, and he used some very statesman language. He was, sometimes these chaps forget that they're in official position. He's the Attorney General.
Yeah, but I mean,
and they feel that they got a right to speak anyhow they choose. And when you speak in a certain way, they run and try to invoke all kinds of things to use against you. But the point I wanted to make is that I was a guest on Dr. David Hines' program along with Comrade Vincent Alexander, and we did give a response to it. And then after the program, I was watching at the comments, and then a few persons called me after the program. I was making the point that the PPP will never agree to power sharing or concede to power sharing. And I wanted to spend a little time to address that, because we got to understand it is true that the PPP left on their own wouldn't want power sharing, because they're on the road to dominance and domination. But in politics and political struggle, while you recognize what the other side would not want to do on its own. You still have to make a you still have to make a judgment, okay, that you could force them to do what they don't want to do. Now, I mean, let me go back to our history. You think the slave masters wanted to end slavery at the time slavery ended? No. It is the pushback of the African slaves and the change in dynamics, and so force them. The point I'm making, no set of rulers who are committed to domination on their own would want to end that domination, okay? And even if they're prepared to end it, they want to prepare to end it on their own timetable
and on their own terms.
On their own terms. So it is because of that you have to struggle, okay, to impose your terms. So while the PPP, yes, on its own, wouldn't want power sharing, and while they will push back to some extent against power sharing, it is we on the opposition and we the African community have to be clear whether we want power sharing. And if we say we want power sharing to defend our interests and to consolidate national interests, it is we who have to fight and to force them into a compromise or wipe them off the scene. You know, you can't be preoccupied by the notion that they would never want to agree. You know, nobody wants to agree to be defeated, but people are defeated every day. So that is the attitude you have to take to these matters, you know, as a political opposition. And the people got to understand, we got to begin to teach our people those political tactics. That yes, they would not want to concede easily, but we could create the conditions to force them to concede, because if things get rough, they got to make a judgment. Do we lose all the power, or do we step back and share the power? And I'm telling you, I study the PPP, and I study the forces that they represent in the country, in the Indian community. They understand power money. And the judgment will be, before we lose everything, let me save half of this thing and let me share it. The problem we have is the African political leadership have not kicked down, you know, the mantra upon shared governance, the shared governance position, and haven't really come out and say, this is the bottom line. We ain't going to another elections under winner take politics. The opposition, you know, is saying that historically, you know, they're willing to consider shared governance, but this country reached further. The opposition got to say whether or not we will participate in the next elections based upon the winner-take-all system. And we have coming up a constitutional reform process, okay, which the country would have an opportunity to revisit the governance system of the country. And Jack Day was on record of saying two things. I remember in the controversy with us, you know, on how we approach the elections and so forth. He said that the PPP, in the PPP judgment, the country ain't ripe for shared governance. There's not enough trust, and he did it. But he went on to say in the same breath that there's going to be a constitutional reform process starting either at the end of the year or early the next year. And he said words to the effect that if the nation, if people want that, they will live with it. It is the first open political compromise from Jagdeo mouth, not from nobody else's mouth, that look, if it push come to shove or we get to that point, we're going to live with it. And I think that's basically Jagdeo's clever enough to know, rather than lose everything, let me keep half of this thing. But we are on our side, we seems to want to promote more the PPP's refusal, okay, to want power sharing, rather than recognize that we are in a strategic thing to make them accept it. Yeah. You know, and there's where I have a little difference with some of people on our side. While I know Jagdeo's and the PP's attitude, I have been following their position on power sharing for years very carefully. And the Jagdeo position is the furthest they ever went to actually concede that if in the constitutional reform process there's where the country wants to go, they will live with it. And I think that that is what the opposition and the African community should buy onto, okay, and to force them to get there, rather than we spending energy saying they ain't gonna get there, they don't want it. Me concern what they want. I concern what we want.
Yeah, that's the point.
You know?
And what you're fighting
And
for.
what you're fighting for.
The people in Niger now have decided what they want. Right?
You know?
And they're fighting for it.
Yeah.
You understand? It has to reach a point where somebody decides that, look, we are not going down the road. They're talking about democracy and return to democracy, but these guys are not. Democracy for the people of Niger has a different meaning.
Yeah.
Right? Democracy for the French and that means continued occupation and raping
domination
and raping resources, which is the same kind of approach that is being meted out here. Right? But the military personnel who have a better vision of what the country needs, because all the uranium and the cobalt and all that going to France to power electrical installations and these things, and they don't have electricity and all these things.
And Nigeria got no electricity.
Yeah, in Ghana and so on, they're producing tons of coffee and cocoa, and the people have never even, some of the people who are growing it have never seen chocolate. You understand what I'm saying? That's the maintenance of the status quo is what they want, right? But we have a military, man, look, I don't know.
Don't let me get to the guy in the military right now. Let me get to the politicians. You see, we have a struggle with our politicians. You see?
It is a struggle for everybody.
Yes.
You understand?
Yeah, we got to struggle with everybody. But you see, I don't want to give the politicians an out.
Okay.
Because the governance system
so why are you giving the people who also should have a very strong saying in the way things run, the military personnel within you're giving them all.
But in our system, the military could say we are subject to the civilian government. And that constitutionally and so. So it is for the political people to create the political crisis. For the military to say, I don't understand what's going on here. You all fix this thing.
You have to get a madman. You have to get a madman somewhere.
But I think that we have to press our political leadership to provide appropriate political direction. It will make matters so much simple for everybody.
Somebody got to play mad somewhere.
You see, but
madness for the sake of repairing what is happening.
Yeah. Right. But we see once people keep voting for leaders, you're hand tied, because in any argument about democracy, you go to United Nations, go to the World Court, you and I, who we represent. And the government they will use those things against you, unless we reach a point where we represent people a lot electorally, but here you see people them thousands in the streets there's who we represent. And see and we who want the country to go in another direction, we have to find a way of getting thousands in the streets so we could say, we're the electoral leaders, but here you see who's supporting we here. There's where the legitimacy come from. And the issues that we raising and the demands we're making is supported by the people. You see, if we don't get ourselves in that position, they get away with a lot of murder. And it makes it difficult for people, even externally and internally, who may want to be helpful. When your official leaders say, no, we don't want what they're doing. We want to go to the elections and we're going to win this thing through the elections. Now you become now a problem. The problem is not the people no more. The problem is you. So that's why I'm saying we have to put enough pressure on the politicians and let them show the true colors to the masses. You see, we have to demonstrate to the masses the true limitations of our electoral politicians, which will create the space for us. Because the people will say, look, we stop voting. We don't care about them. We voting in the streets. At massive rallies and with public demonstrations, that's how we voting right now. And these people here speaking for me. We withdrew with support from the parliamentary leadership for the moment. We might deal with them a little later, but right now, they ain't got the right to speak for me. That's where we got to force the country to, if the leadership doesn't want to do the correct thing.
See, I'm looking at the historical context of the African struggle. Haiti, I mean, even St. Eustatius, here in Guyana. I mean, people, as a people, we had to take decisions to confront a system that was pretty demeaning to us, that relegated us to being chattel, being inhuman, and everything. And it is the same thing that is happening here. The only, in fact, we are being beaten. We are being beaten by the fact that our lands are being taken away, our homes are being bulldozed, we are not being allowed to speak freely, as we are seeing happening here. That whenever we raise our heads to speak, that we are bullied, like Jacobs would have been bullied, and so on. And all of these things are taking place. And the approach to dealing with that by our ancestors was not just to sit down and allow it to take place.
Yes.
All right? We talk about revolution, we talk about revolts. All right? We talk all of those. We talk about taking, approaches that were not fully open confrontational approaches, but they had effective ways of dealing with situations that impacted the system in a way that made it recognize that it could not continue. All right? But we are doing none of that. We are doing none of that. I mean, you're saying we're talking, we have people on programs and we're fighting back through the media and so on, but we got to go beyond that.
Yeah, I agree with you.
We have to go beyond
I agree, but we also have to recognize the present realities. In our ancestors' time was we against we and the white people. Now we got a country where Africans against half of the country, a massive Indian population and Amerindian population, which complicates the equation, and we got different interests. And whereas the white man was seen as the enemy, in this equation, the way the politics develop, Indians are seen as the enemy.
I don't
From
say
African,
Indians are seen as...
hold on, and let me finish. Indians are, in the presence of a racial conflict and a racial competition, in the eyes of the Africans, Indians is the problem, seen as a competitor. Indians see Africans as a competitor. We all don't recognize the Americans as no competitor because we feel they have no political power, they have no economic power. So in our, the Portuguese got a major chunk of economic power in the country, but they have been able for the last couple of decades to lie low politically. So, at the political level, they get under the radar. And the problem is the two major groups, and basically the way the matters, the politics develop, it dealt in a big way along racial lines and racial interests. Now, it doesn't mean that the bulk of the Indians are racist or the bulk of the Africans are racist. That's a different story, the difference between racial interests and racism. But I'm saying that in the early days, when our ancestors were active, we dealing with the oppressor, the white man, and ourselves. Now we're dealing in a different situation with half of your country, who has a legitimate right to say how the country will run. Okay, so and we have the same right. But we got this problem that we sign on to what we call a constitution and a governance system, which say we go in by elections and one man, one vote. And he who come out with the one vote more than the other gun have all the power. And the rest have to accept that and to live with that until they get another elections. Now, we know that in the real world of politics, you also have to fight between elections, but we are not fighting, our opposition are not fighting between elections. So you left with a situation where you got the PPP with power. However they get it, it becomes legal, which they're using against you, which is being recognized in the international community, in the regional community, okay? And you box into that reality. And you have to fight in that dynamics. It doesn't mean you mustn't fight, but you got to understand the dynamics in which you're fighting. And it requires your conventional political leadership, who is mandated constitutionally, internationally recognized as official political leadership, in order to change the dynamics of the engagement. They have to play a major role, but not they may not play the decisive role at all times, but they have to say the present situation, we're going to take our system in Guyana, is unworkable, it ain't working, we're investing it, we want something new. Open up the whole ball game. But to the extent they're saying, like the PPP, we're going to take our system, is good, we want it for another elections. People like that. Now you know, me and you who saying it can't work, we become the rebels.
I remember a man named George Spade. I don't know if you know the name.
George
Spade.
Spade. It doesn't ring a bell.
Okay. He was one man who held up the Fijian. One man. Yes. It brought about.
But Fiji is a country where the Fiji army has been clear here on the red lines.
Well,
you know, we don't have an army here that is clear, and I don't really want to talk army business for China, not in the context of the story. But no, we have an army that has said we're committed to the Constitution, we're committed to the rule of law, whatever that means. We're under the control of a civilian authority, and so. Now, I don't have no problem with that. But when the civilian authority violate the law and violate the Constitution, and you support them in the violation of the Constitution, whoever is the government, I got a problem with that, because you're not being genuine to the Constitution. You know?
So in all these violations that they can face, I mean,
you know,
what do we do?
You know,
I mean, I'm trying to push for a different approach to this sitting here and talking, because we got to move beyond that. That's my view.
Yeah.
We have to move beyond that for the change that we want. All right? And if we have to begin to talk revolution and revolt, then within the context of this period of emancipation, we have to begin to talk.
Yeah.
Right?
But we have to do more than talking.
Well, they were saying.
We have to make the talk manifest into action.
That is the point.
And that is the challenge.
Right? That is
the challenge. Yeah. And I don't want to advocate that from the station, but so we got to go back into the communities.
We got to
go back into the communities. And we got to, you know, work with our people.
The media monitoring unit, I mean, they're going to be monitoring. We can't stop them from being pro-government as they have demonstrated. But we have our concerns about this station, yes. But we cannot, you know, I mean.
But I'm more comfortable of dealing with those things like the street
corners. Yeah, but we did that.
Yeah. Because there is where the battle's supposed to be fought.
And Jack in his position, that he just got to lock up his problem.
I think
he doesn't even know sometimes when he speaks that his thoughts are manifest of his ideology.
And we will have to return back to the streets.
Yeah, but we have to do that.
We have to return to the streets, you know. You see, we're reaching a point where talk is becoming irrelevant. Right? And I was trying my best not to go down the road for the station, but we got to meet them. We got to meet them up on the streets.
Definitely. You know, I mean, we're going to talk some more about that. But Dr. Roger Lanchan, one who has been in the political struggle for eons of years, we marched together in the struggle against the PNC. Unfortunately, I mean, we became part of a regime that even demonstrated worse tenets than the PNC during their time. I think it was unfortunate that he ended up in that kind of situation and became the chief defender of the atrocities of that regime. But in his passing, we must recognize that he played a role politically and not only politically, but he was one of our specialists, internal specialists in the medical field. And we must express, on my own behalf, condolences to his relatives and recognize him for what he was. I don't know, Owen, you
Yes.
know Roger more personally than
Yeah,
I do.
because we live in the same community for many years, Kitty, and almost in the same street. No, I think it is important for the program Groundings and the WPA by extension. We want to be civil. Roger was unlike the slave catchers, the black slave catchers who attached to the PPP. He like Robson are genuine black PPP people. You know, Robson grew up in the Jagon's house. So, and Roger was always in the PPP from young, you know, and you know, so you know he is in a different category. And Roger did end his active political career with a level of acceptability across parties. He was not seen, you know, in the opposition camp as as a degenerate element in the PPP. And you know, we have to, even though we fight and we're fighting, we still have to maintain some amount of level of civility, you know, because at the end of the day, you still have a country to build and a country to lead. And in my case, you know, I knew him because we were active in the Kitty there, you know, in Kitty. I remember when he came back as a doctor and so and so. My daughter's mother was a nurse, and many times I'm towing her to work. And he joined us because he used to ride his bicycle just like me. And we rode down to the hospital, and she and he will give the medical story, and me, you know, and then we, you know, cross with the politics and so. So we had that kind of community and social connection. And I really felt that I had to go. I really felt that, you know, I wanted to go to the funeral. And I felt that it's the least I could have done. But I was reading a speech, extracts of a speech by Jagdeo at an activity they had for Roger. And they say that that was a kind of preview of what he's likely to say at the funeral. And I mean, when I read that, I got second thoughts. But I really should go to the funeral and subject myself to hear that kind of garbage from Jagdeo. And I want to be truthful to the nation and the viewers. I haven't made my mind up, you know, because I really feel it's an insult to subject myself and to subject the Guyanese people to what Jagdeo wants to portray and to use luncheon to portray. But I wanted to say it to the country because luncheon was an African person, and we activists and organizations in the African community have had cause to speak to him or to try to put him under pressure, you know, to explain the PPP's behavior to Africans. And I want to put in the public space 3 things about luncheon. Luncheon admits that the PPP is an Indian party. He had no bones about that. He admits that he, Luncheon, will never in his lifetime be a presidential candidate for the PPP, given the racial considerations in the party. And he said that if Africans believe that he don't defend the interests, if he wasn't there, it would be 10 times worse. I want to put those 3 things in the public space. So in remembering Luncheon, they want to remember Luncheon in the way Jagdeo and them choose. I seek to remember Luncheon, okay, in a different way, what he said to African groups and African people who confront him on the role he's playing in the PPP and his association with the party. So I want to put it in the public record and use the Rodney Groundings to put it in the public space.
Okay. No, but I mean, you have said that it's significant because today we are asking ourselves whether these African people in the PPP, whether any of them, any of them has the temerity to stand up and to speak on our behalf.
No. Those are soup drinkers. Luncheon, people like luncheon, and as I tell and groups and Ben, are organic to PPP. And luncheon used to make the point that if luncheon couldn't change them, you think these newcomers, and he was there, he went on the Chedi,
I know.
And he had the blessings of Chedi, And when Chedi passed, it gets worse. And if somebody like Luncheon couldn't get the PPP to reason, ethnic reason, so you think these soup drinkers and these slave catchers go start up a fight in the PPP? They won't fight for no African interest. They fight their own personal interests. Is all they're concerned with.
And they're going to be told to walk like some of them.
They will not. The question with them walk and come up because they will fight. Mm-hmm. They know that they ain't go there for fight. They go there for drink soup, okay, and that's what they're concerned. We not defend no African interests. I mean, if the PPP behavior in the African community has anything to do with the presence of the Prime Minister who's African, if that is what he brings to the PPP, that level of disrespect for the African people, okay, it speaks volumes. I mean, I don't know how those chaps could live with themselves, because that is how his presence in the PPP is being portrayed in the most lowest, backward, form. You don't have no sense of him bringing anything new, anything positive to PPP behavior. PPP behavior right now is the worst in the history of the party. And we never remember the name. What's the name of the Prime Minister?
Phillips.
Some Phillips. I don't even. I have to contemptuous in the man. I don't even know the man. Whoever is the Prime Minister's name. I mean, if that is, if what they're doing in the African community is what Phillips has brought to the PPP, then it speaks quite a lot.
I'm still trying to remember the man first name.
He was a brigadier, no?
Yeah, Mark. No?
Mark. I think Mark. Yeah.
But I tell you, you should be. I mean, the consciousness of you, you in our consciousness is so. It speaks a lot.
It speaks a lot.
Yeah. I mean, what about Jack Bio is touting, again, the man is such a, I don't know how to describe him, but he seems to believe that Guyanese are doing so much better now than prior the 5 years of the APNU and before that. He's talking about old age pensioners getting $33,000 and all of these things. And he's not looking at what is happening actually on the ground in terms of the cost of living and so on. I had cause to go to the immigration department, Camp Street Passport Office. And if that is a sign that we are doing well, and we're not talking about black people, you understand? The PPP is in power. Jack Dio is saying that the country is doing well. Go to the passport office, see who are the people that are flocking there from 5 o'clock in the morning to get their passports to continue the exodus from Guyana. So, how do we factor in Jack Dio's nonsense with the reality of people who can't eat when they come?
Yeah. You see, I mean, we're in a complex phenomenon in the sense that the country is doing better because the country has more money, unprecedented in the history of the country, which the rulers are spending, and as a consequence of the rulers spending the money and thieving and whatever they're doing, there's more economic activity around the place. So, to some extent, more employment will be created here and there. and those who get the contracts will be making money. But the question is how the majority of the population is interests, are being addressed in this period of plenty. And when you watch at the wage structure in the country, okay, in light of the inflationary pressures, some of it is some external and some of it is internal, and you watch it in comparison as it reflects in prices and in comparison to Guyanese income, that is where the problem lies. That the population, even the working population, okay, the majority of them, I was going through the web by accident the other day, and I sum up on a website, and they were looking at Guyanese cost of living and incomes, and they were making the point that for Guyanese to really live comfortably, the people in Guyana who were really considered could live comfortable, you got to begin to earn $400,000 or more. And they was making the point that the average Guyanese earn less than $150,000. And minimum for them, they were making a point for poor people, at least they got to get about $300,000 in order to deal with the present cost of living. Now the bulk of the population was working in touching $200,000. Yeah. Then we have a large section of unemployed people, and also a large section of underemployed people. And when you add that, the bulk of the population is in poverty and can't, meet the prices in the marketplace. And that is what is the real reality. And why Jagdo keeping lies, people are starving. People are starving, and it's cut across race. The idea see the sugar workers, I wanted to make joke for strike. So they strike about something.
No, they moved them from Skeldon and send them back or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, the wages are not realistic, and the fact is they are using a strategy now. They're contending. We're talking about people being unemployed and so on, and we know that there are lots of people who are unemployed in the country, but they're making the point that there is a shortage of the labor force by over 100 and something thousand persons.
Yeah.
Now, this strategy that they're using is simply to bring people here, you understand, whom they're going to, within a year or so, give, like they're doing with the Venezuelans, give them citizenship.
And they become voters. Yeah, it's part of the political
agenda. Right? So, you got a population with people who every day, look, most of them, I write recommendations to people and so on. Most of the jobs they're getting is either for going yard somewhere, or yardy or gardier. If you have this large pool of available jobs, why aren't people coming for jobs in other sectors that are meaningful for the semi-skilled and the skilled people that you're talking about?
The PPP have a very orchestrated and well worked out plan to keep Africans at the bottom of the economic and social ladder. And I don't really, it hurts me to have to constantly say it, because we passed the point of talking. We know the problem, our challenge is doing them. And that is the difficulties that we have. We don't have the difficulty to talk. Oh yeah, if I really want to abuse the PPP, I abuse it from now till the very morning, but to an end. Yeah. They're going to say like the jackass sing,
Right.
Like pray. That is why we got to reach them back in the streets.
Well, let's hope the sooner we begin to do that, and we hope that when we get to the streets, that people are going to begin to agitate and understand, because they understand very well the work that the WPA was doing, and they feared it.
Yeah.
The demonstration of their fear was the fact that they followed us all around, to every community that we went. After we left, they went in with their, what they call it?
Pacification program, trying to outreach, trying to pacify people.
Pacify people, right? But people got to go beyond that and recognize that, look, these are only you know, camouflaged attempts at you know, trying to keep them within a certain way. And the other thing is that the strategy they use is to get into many of the communities that, like in Ansgrove and so on, there's a co-op there where there is land and so on. They use those opportunities to push themselves within the affairs of the co-ops so that they can now begin to use
on the money from inside
and begin to try to appropriate
the land
and so on. So people got to be very careful with what they're doing, you know, because they're not there to serve their interests in any detail way. All of the meetings that they've had and the promises that they've made to those people, let's ask them how much.
Those promises never intended to be fulfilled.
Well, what they benefited from.
No, it wasn't intended to be fulfilled. It was just to try to appease and to try to fight back against the pressure we were putting on them. But we have to continue to do it, you know, and when we get back on the streets, you know, we deal with Jagdo and the PPP in the appropriate way. Our people have to make up their mind.
Yeah, well, you know, we got to do that.
Make up their mind.
The focus of, I don't know how much time we have, but we have cases of domestic violence that continue to plague our country. I saw Pastor Nigel London trying to do some forensics in relation to the death of a young woman, where it is alleged, he's alleging that the person who would have claimed that the young lady committed suicide is somehow working with the office of the president or something, who should be the primary suspect. So a 19-year-old young lady has been killed, and there's the other incident.
Where a man shot his wife and killed himself on somewhere on the highway.
Linden Suicide Highway. But what do you make of these things? What is driving this?
I mean,
is it part of the entire atmosphere in the country where people feel that, you know, there's a sense of hopelessness and hopelessness on the one hand, and then there's a sense that because I am aligned and attached, I am free to do what I want to do.
Yes, I think both things are factors, you know, and I mean in these matters, you want the social scientists to lead us rather than be the politicians trying to lead. But at least I am beginning to feel pressure. People are asking us to speak out on these matters, you know. Sometimes you try to, you know, the problem you got in Guyana is that some people say politicians are getting into everything. And we want to play, you know, we know the answers to everything. And sometimes when you leave certain areas to the specialists and they don't satisfy the expectations of the masses, then people come back to you and say, you know, things getting by, you gotta begin to speak out, and they're asking the program to, you know, to carry more things on these matters. So I'm concerned, and I think it's a reflection of the general degeneration in the country, both politically, economically, and socially, and culturally. In a society like us, who have shown very little regards for life and the welfare of people, because when you work those things to the bottom line, I mean, I don't want to spend a lot of time when young women, you know, meshing up with very aged men. The bottom line always is be money. And if they're in a society where they get jobs easy and they get jobs that is paying, they are the less of that pressure. I mean, I don't want to argue whether a young person got a right to love or elderly person, but I don't think it's love. I think a lot of it is driven by the economic and social deprivation conditions. So there's always that kind of the link. And even among mature couples, most times when you watch what the fight is about in homes, is the ends can't meet. You know, that the women are forced that they got to look after the family economically and to provide daily, meals, and the man got to bring in some of the money, and we bringing in can't make sense.
Right.
And then you got this constant nagging and pulling and it degenerate, and these relationships get out of hand, and it manifests itself the way which it manifests. But we are at a point objectively in the country, given the money that we're getting and will get from oil, that we could put in place a state-of-the-art welfare system like Sweden and Switzerland and countries got. And there are millions of people. We have the advantage of only having a small population. So the kind of money that we have from oil, we have to press for more attention being given to these social matters which we have money to address, which I believe will eventually play out to our advantage and to reduce a lot of the carnage we get out of domestic violence. So while we recognize it as a problem, we also to recognize that we got in the horizon the solution to the problem, which is to develop a welfare system from birth to death that will guide people in a certain way and ensure certain things don't happen to them.
Jaglio is contending that we haven't received a whole lot of money to effect this kind of transformation of the lives of people in the way that we want it to be.
But we have enough.
They're spending it
upon infrastructure.
Yeah.
We need infrastructure development, but you have to have a better balance.
Definitely.
And who decide where the priorities ought to be? It ought not to be the PPP in the government by itself. In any proper country, the government, the opposition, of civil society, and a wide array of forces decide on those fundamental things. How much we're going to put into infrastructure, how much we're going to put into social programs. But here, they're the bullies. They dominate the political space. They control your money, and they decide that we want infrastructure, and so we could put money in the hands of your friends and your family, and we could accelerate, the development, of a new and vicious ruling class, backed by a lot of money, and ask the ordinary people, African and Indians and Amerindians, to remain in poverty in a longer period of time that is objectively necessary. There's no justification for the poverty rate in Guyana to be what it is in light of what we already have as money received from oil. We have enough money, we receive enough money that could have put a big dent on the pressures that ordinary people are facing as a result of the inflationary pressures, in the economy and so forth. But they don't care about that because, you see, that we are victims of the political culture, of the politics. The PPP is under no pressure. They depend on the Indian vote in the main to keep them in power. The Indian community haven't reached a point where they're prepared to withdraw the vote from the PPP and threaten PPP power. The PPP realized that given that reality, they got space. We give the Indians we give the Indian masses something a little better than we give the African masses, but the Indian elite and we friends get their hawk of the money. But we keep the Indian masses quiet and we keep them loyal to us politically. So we could engage in spending money in a way that strengthens our political and social interests at the expense of the ordinary people. And they realize that the African position and the trade unions are so weak and so compromised that they are under no pressure. You see? They are under no pressure. So what they're doing, they're postponing addressing poverty and the social conditions of the people because they're not under pressure from the masses to address it now in an urgent situation.
Well, but I mean, Indians are speaking, they are conscious.
Yes, they're conscious, and they believe everybody belly biting.
And they're marching with their, you know,
Well, you know, they got a way out.
right.
You know,
You know, but if you speak with Indians, they are absolutely conscious of
yeah, but what we want them to is vote against
yeah,
the PPP.
but they're not,
You see, that's the key, because now it's a voting, is by voting we determine who will control, who win the thing. And so if they're not voting against the PPP, and I see the PPP, as you pointedly correct, the PPP is trying to compensate for the Indian outflow by bringing in new migrants and gaining them, you know, citizenship. This is what they're addressing, you know.
Yeah.
That's what they're addressing. You see? And, you know, so yes, the cost of living for the ordinary people, pensioners and people who have fixed incomes and so, is dread. It's dread.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
It's dread. You know.
Well, I don't know, but we are sitting, we're taking everything. There is no unity in this struggle. I mean, I know of times, you know, even under the PPP, where there would have been a meeting of the people to demand certain conditions. But now, you know, you're not even hearing about any kind of suggestion of struggle from the political arena, from the
trade union, from the civic society.
It seems as though we just left as a people to take whatever licks are being meted out to us, and we got.
You know, you're in a situation where the trade unions even threatening strike. What they even threatening them. You know, they just accept that, well, look, we can't do nothing. They can't do nothing in this equation.
Yeah, we're at a sad
and
junction.
the sad junction. That's why we have to get back to the streets and to get into the corners where the poorer sections of the population lies, and to begin to get some energies going.
Okay, Brother Oban, it's been a pleasure having you on the program. I think another program, the African Drum, is supposed to be on.
Okay.
So you can stay tuned for the African Drum, where more enlightening discussions will take place. It's been a pleasure being with you. Do have a good night. See you next week, same time, same channel, for another program of Walter Rodney Groundings. Good night.
Good night.